I'm building a saddle right now that's got a running W border, or what we call a serpentine border. It's just a simple border stamp. It's not very hard to put together, and I wanted to do a real quick video just to show you how to handle these types of border stamps in corners, because they can be a little bit tricky, and that's the main part. Most people understand how the borders run and how to lay it out, but I'm going to show you that too, but mainly in the corners, because that's usually the trickiest part, on where it ends or where it corners. And so we're going to go to the tooling bench, and I'm just going to show you a quick tip on how to set these up, and that way yours will come out even and the corners will all look the same and look nice. So let's get at it. So I've got a scrap piece of 13-15 ounce Herman oak skirting leather. That's what we're using here. This would be something like I would do for a saddle fender or a rope can lid or something like that. The main thing here is going to be, like I said, setting up your corner. So we've got a nice corner here, and that'll kind of be what will normally be up against no matter what you're tooling. Other than a belt, it's pretty much a straight run. But I'll show you how to set this up. What I like to do is I usually come in 5/8 of an inch from the edge, and that's going to set us up for stitches as well as an outside border stamp. So normally when I run one of these, I'll use a crescent border of some type, and so they're all roughly the same. So if we were to cut our border at that mark and set our calipers there, then that'll give us enough room on the outside so that we can set the border and then still have room here for our stitch line and our edging and all that. If you're going to use a bigger type border stamp like this, which is what I'm using on the saddle that we're currently building, and so you can see what the normal crescent looks like there, and you see how shallow that little stamp is compared to this one. It's much larger. So there you'll have to adjust your spacing from the outside edge of your leather to where the actual cut line is for your double bead. Now you don't have to do a bead line, which is what this is here. This is basically done with a swivel knife with a bead blade in it, and so that's going to cut two lines so that you have this little bead here in the middle. So it's cutting a line here and cutting a line there. You don't have to use that if you're not going to do an outside stamp like this. If you just want this middle section of this border, then you would just you can absolutely just cut one line and put that in. I prefer to do a double, what I call a double bead border, which would have two beads, your running stamp of whatever style of border you want in the middle, and then your outside stamps. To me, that makes it a little bit more professional, looks a little cooler. It's got a little bit more going on to it than just this center section. So what we'll do is we've got our spacing set up there, and so we'll go ahead and whatever your piece looks like, you'll just go around your edge, however that edge is. We'll run this here to our corners, and that's going to be the outside. When you set these up, these scribe lines, that's going to be the outside of your bead line. So your border will be inside of this. And so that'll give us our correct spacing. Now we'll take our bead blade, and you can get these. This is just a cheap little Tandy swivel knife that I keep a Berry King beater blade in there. And so he has these blades, I think, in different widths and stuff. I'm not sure the width of this one. Let's see if I can guess. It looks to be about an 1/8 inch bead, somewhere around there. That's not really that crucial. I've got another one that's wider. It's just personal preference. And you're going to want to cut on the inside of your scribe line, because if we cut on the outside, now you're going to make this distance to the edge smaller, and your outside stamps may be too close to your stitches. So we'll come in here and we'll just cut that line in, and you can see there how it's cutting two lines at one time. And so that'll create our bead. Okay, that gives you the idea. One quick note, when I'm running bead blades, I stop on the inside and I leave this uncut. Don't overcut. Some guys will just run all the way to the corner, and then you've got a little nick right there where on your bead. I'd prefer the bead to be one piece. We're going to come in here with our border stamps anyway, so there's no need. If you wanted to, you could take a swivel knife and then just cap that off if it bothers you. Another thing too, on bead lines, you can certainly bevel all these lines if you wanted to, either with a push beveler or with a regular beveler. I don't bevel any of them. A border stamp is more decorative, and I don't take the time to go ahead and bevel all those beads. You certainly can, and if you think it looks better, you can certainly take the time to do that, but I would do that after you run your serpentine on the inside, and then bevel the inside of that, and then bevel the outside, and then run your stamps. Our stamp that we're going to be using today is a Berry King crescent, and it's really flat there on the back side. And so whenever we run that stamp, it actually kind of bevels that outside of that bead. So I don't bother wasting time beveling that, but you certainly can if you'd like. So now we've got to figure out our spacing. So we've got our outside borderline that frames us in, and now we'll take our stamp. Now I have this particular one here. It's a hack barth. It is a serpentine border with a dot right there in the middle. There's other ones. You'll see many times guys use these, which are like an hourglass. These you're going to have to space them out and get your calipers set for your spacing from front to front or back to front or whatever, so that you know how far apart to run them. For this deal, we're going to use this one, and I really like these a little better. They're a lot easier to line up. But what we've got to figure out is our spacing. So what I like to do is just come in here anywhere and just real lightly put one in and then put the other one and figure out how far apart you want these things to be. And so I'm going to try to get them lined up there about where I think they'll look good. And then you can barely see a little bit of an impression right there. And then we'll set our calipers, our dividers here, we'll set those up to that correct amount of spacing. And then I like to give it just a little bit more, just because sometimes when you carve, it's going to close that area in a bunch, and we don't want them looking squished together too much. So now what you'll do is you'll come on the inside of your bead line. So we're going to mark in the one leg of the dividers is going to be on the inside of the bead line, and this one will mark the inside of the inside bead line. And so now we'll just follow that down. Then we'll do the same with this one, and we'll meet there in the corner. And so again, we don't want to change this space that we just made in between these, so we're going to carve on the inside, which would technically be the outside of the border, but you know, to the inside of the piece, we'll carve that line. Now, if this piece was continued to go and you'd go all the way around, it might connect on one end. If it doesn't, this is what I like to do if it doesn't connect. So if you're doing like the top of a fender, or maybe a belt, or anywhere you need to just end this to where it can just stop, it's not going to really make a turn or anything, I'll carry this all the way to the point where it needs to end, and then arc one to that. And so that way you get that type of look there. I'll do that a lot of times on belts right before the initials, if it doesn't look right coming out from underneath the initials, or on the bend end, you can do that as well. But just do one straight and then do one arced. You can bring them both together to like a point, like kind of like an English point on the end of a belt. But I think this way looks really good when we go to finishing this up. And then you can take your swivel knife and just finish that corner up if you'd like. But this side we'll just let it run wild for now. Okay, so now we've got our lines. We've got two bead lines, the proper spacing in the middle here for this particular stamp. So this is where the trick comes into setting it up. When you've got corners like this, what I like to do is take all of my corners. So if you're doing a photo album, you'll have 4 corners obviously where it goes around. I'll set all 4 of those corners first. And the way you want to set your corners is you want to set those on the inside bead line. So you want to come right in here, and what we're going to do is we're going to take this stamp and we're going to line up the outside leg right there on that corner. And then we're going to come here and do the same on this corner. So we're going to do 2 stamps in the corner, one on each run of that corner right there. So it'll look like that. And so we'll do this to the other corner as well. Any corner you have, anywhere it makes a 90 degree, that's the way you're going to have to set it up. And you got to remember when you're doing stuff like this, corners are noticed first. Corners and edges are always going to be noticed first. So when somebody looks at this pattern, they're going to notice these corners. So let's get them right. We can fill in the runs in between those corners fairly easily, but corners are tricky, and so we're going to go ahead and get those set up. So now what we'll do is we'll do this run right here. Now this short a distance, the way this stamp works is The stamp's there. Well, then you'll line up on this type of serpentine border. You'll line up this next corner or this next edge of this leg. You'll line it up right at the end of where the last stamp was. And if you do that, it'll give you the exact right spacing for the one on the other side that comes up the top. So see, they're side by side. They're touching right there in the middle. That leg, those two legs ended up touching each other. So now this amount of spacing in here is perfect for this stamp. When you line it up, and all you have to do now is center it. So there's no marking involved with this particular stamp, any of this style. You just line them up and they end up just right. And so you can make this entire run just putting them end to end, and you don't have to space it out. Now, since we've got this other corner done, what we're going to do is we're going to lightly lay these in here. As I get close to a corner where I'm going to need to close it off, I'll kind of lay them in there real lightly and just get a mark and make sure they're going to fit. And that's all I'm trying to do, because if I need to nudge one closer, like right there, they're overlapping pretty good. So what I'm going to have to do now is I'm going to overlap this one with this one, this one with this one. I'm going to overlap just a little bit to gain a little distance by the time I get to this corner. And so that'll give us a little bit better spacing there at that corner, and they won't be so crammed together. So if you were to set dividers on here and measure all of these are going to be a little bit smaller than these, but it's not enough to notice, versus if we'd have run them end to end all the way and then cram that last one in there, these two would have been very noticeable. So on longer distances, you have more time to start kind of contracting them or expanding them out just a little bit to vary for any kind of distance. But doing it like that, now your corners are set and they're going to look correct. So we'll finish that corner off and I'll show you. And so now you're just laying these in and centering them between the two stamps. So now we've got a full deal here of the serpentine border, and our corners look exactly the same on both sides. So now what we can do is we can add one more stamp right here and then one more right here, and what that's going to do is create a neat little shape in the corner. And every stamp's a little bit different. Sometimes it looks like a heart, sometimes it just looks like a spade. It just kind of depends what the stamp itself looks like. But now you've got a really nice image there in the corner that looks even. And so that's why I set those corners first. That's the hardest part when running one of these serpentine borders, is getting your corners set up. If you get your corners set up on those 90s, the rest of it runs really smoothly. And so you don't have to fight it and chance getting your corners off. So now you can see on there, both of those corners look almost identical. And if you want to get real creative, you can come in here and add just a little bit of decorative cut just for fun. I used to do that quite a bit, and that always kind of adds a little bit of just a little touch to it, just to kind of decorate it just a little bit. But you can see how nice that makes the corner. So now on these longer runs, you always want to work on the inside bead line and set those first, mainly because we're setting the corners. So we're going to work off the corners. The top or the outer line, all you're doing there is spacing them out in between two stamps. So that's fairly easy. So here we're just going to run this all the way to the end. It's going to be pretty simple. We're just end to end like we did over here, end to end all the way until we get to the end. Now, as you get to an end on one of these, the way these look, you can go as far or as short as you want. It doesn't matter, but you're going to create a kind of a little swoop type of spade shape or something in there. And so if we go ahead and just test, we're going to run one extra one right here on top. Oop. And so we can see how we like that shape. And if you want to add another one, you can go ahead and add one more right here. And so it just kind of your personal preference on what you want. You could have, I probably should have left that one out. I think it would have looked a little better with that bigger shape there, but that would be a way to end it. So you can either end it at the top or end it at the bottom. Either way, these are really easy. That's just your personal preference. The main thing is going to be the corners. So now we'll space all these here in the middle, and then we'll run our outside border. Okay, so that's the straight run. Now, the reason I don't bevel, like if you look at that, it looks all really even. I like that the serpentine is the same height as the bead. I used to bevel the inside of this with a beveler, but to me it kind of squashes it down and it doesn't look as crisp. And it looks really good when you antique one of these. If you're doing smooth leather, you can antique this. It looks really good because it catches a lot of antique. But you can certainly bevel the inside of this if you'd rather, but I prefer it not to be beveled, so that's how I leave it. So now we'll run the outside stamp, and this is done the same way. Anytime I run a border stamp of any kind, I will always set my corners first. So I'll come here and I'll stamp, and then I'll come here and get this one. Again, corners are always seen first. The customer or somebody looking at your work is going to notice the corners. They stand out. So why not make those stamps in perfectly instead of having 2 or 3 that overlap right here in that corner. We're going to go ahead and set those and then run off each end from there, and the corners will look perfectly like they ended exactly where they needed to be. And this stamp, we just put it right up against the edge, outside edge of our bead. And so now as you get to the end of this border here, I'm going to go ahead and set my corner, and then I'm going to work back towards the other, and I can tell as I get close if I need to start moving them closer together or further apart to make them end correctly. So always leave yourself a little bit of an out there. And now we'll come on the inside of this, and we'll set us a couple in the corner here, and then work our way out. And that sets up that's our completed double bead border right there. So as you can see, setting up your corners is going to be a lot easier on any type of border stamp. There are some border stamps that it's almost impossible to do a 90-degree corner. You've just got to be kind of creative. On some of those, I think we did like a rope border one time or something. We've had some trouble with some type of border stamps, which we don't do a lot of border stamping, but we have had some trouble in the past. And what I've started doing was, if I've got a stamp, a particular style of running border stamp that just won't make a 90-degree nicely, like there's really no good way to do it, I will tool a flower right here. Just add a nice little flower or maybe a cross or whatever, some type of image to where this running border can go, hit that image and look like it goes up underneath and then come out of here. So you're kind of covering the corner to cover the fact that that border really won't make a nice corner. A lot of these border stamps are set up for belts, strap goods, things like that. So some of them aren't really set up real nicely to make corner shape. So that's just something you've got to contend with. But it's not too bad. You can usually get around it somehow and work around those type of situations. But that's how to set up a serpentine border. Like I said, just a real quick tip. I've seen a lot of people where they've kind of made a mistake there. They're doing this outside bead first or whatever. Their corners just don't end up just right. But that's a quick, easy way to make sure that your corners are always going to look good, and it makes running these straight runs much easier because everything's set up correctly from the start. So set your corners first, move on from there. Thank you very much. Be sure and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next video.